Hello and welcome to the Aviation Barbecue for some more informal aviation chat. Today we're tackling one of the most exciting topics in military aviation, and that is US Navy carrier operations. Joining us is Lieutenant Commander Matt Gottschalk, call sign Abe, and he's going to tell us all about his flying from the T-45 through to the Super Hornet and now with the F-5 in the adversary role with VFC 13 at Naval Air Station Fallon.
Yeah, Jamie, great to see you, man. I am in beautiful Fallon, Nevada, home of Top Gun and VFC 13, where we do a lot of the adversary support. So that's where I'm at right now. We've been here for about 5 years and about to enjoy a gorgeous day outside, hopefully flying a little bit later on.
That's so good. So the coronavirus thing isn't affecting military operations where you are?
It is and it isn't. It's weird in a strange way. The military in large has put a travel ban on all military movement, especially non-essential military movement, until June 30th. So any all military members can't move until June 30th, like travel around. So normally what the fleet squadrons are doing in the Navy is they're going to Key West, out on the ship, and or come to Fallon to train, and that's just not happening right now. So some of the dates that were planned for movement across the country have they've gotten pretty creative with things. So there's a lot of the nice thing about Fallon is we are actually really close to Lemoore in terms of flying the way the way the bird goes.
Yeah.
So those squadrons, with the amount of gas that they have in their jets, they're actually able to launch out of Lemoore, their home station, come across the hill, we call it, come train and fight with us without even having to land, and then fly back to Lemoore. So they lose a little bit with their, the amount of gas they have to use in the transit, but they are able to still do some flying. So what that's caused us to be in Fallon is busier than we were actually planning, because now we're picking up more support because of that collateral right there, which is actually a good deal for us, because we are just supporting 4 or 5 events a day out of Fallon. So VFC 13, that's what we do. It's nice when they're here because we can brief face-to-face with them, and then they have all the extra gas that they can do, just launch in the area, use everything they can tactically, come back and land, instead of having to use some of that for transit fuel. But the nice thing is that we're still able to do training, we're still able to be employed, and we're still getting work done for the Navy, which is awesome.
That's great. So can you just tell me a little bit about, we'll talk about what you do now a little bit later on, but in terms of your career and about your time in the Navy, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think like everybody, some people, get started a little later in what they want to do. For me, this is something I always wanted to do. It turns out one of my grandfathers actually worked for Northrop Grumman out in Long Island, New York, and he designed the lunar excursion module, but specifically the gold part, the landing part that landed on the moon. That was his design when he worked for Northrop Grumman. And then he retired to Florida, had a bunch of RC airplanes, and I remember going down there as a kid and just watching all those fly all the time. So I was enamored from a young age just from his influence. And then, of course, he was in the Navy. My dad was in the Navy. I had another grandfather who was in the Navy. And then right when I was about 3 years old, Top Gun came out. So there was a big influence there watching that. So it was always, Navy, jets all the way, and just kind of kept that goal all the way through. Turns out I went to an aeronautical college in Tulsa, Oklahoma, started working on planes and flying there. Applied to the Navy, did not get picked up the first time, so applied again, and they finally said, sure. So, that was in 2007 when I graduated, and I've been in the Navy ever since. Standard flight school route, T-34s in Corpus Christi, T-45s in Meridian, and then went to fly the F-18 in Lemoore, and then operationally in Virginia Beach from 2011 to 2014, where we did a cruise on the Truman over 2013, 2014, and then luckily I've been in Fallon for the last 5.5 years flying the F-5 as an adversary, and that's been a short 12 years, it seems like, but that's been it. So very, very blessed with the opportunity to go to jets and to do the opportunity, have the things that we've just the experiences that I've had, been pretty remarkable, especially lately with the F-5, and then some of the stuff I got to do on cruise and the F-18.
So can you tell me a little bit about going through that kind of getting your wings of gold, obviously the T-45, that training, and then going through the FRS? And presumably you went through the RAG at Lemoore then, onto the Super Hornet.
when you're in flight school, your job is simply to learn that aircraft, learn the fundamentals, and show up every day prepared to really not master, but like work on the things that are specific to that flight every day, because you're not going to be good. That's where the training comes in. And so you're not being a division officer. You're not working with sailors so much at that point. That's not really your job. That'll come later. Because naval aviation has so many different facets to it, and specifically our discipline being a tactical, fighter and attack at the same time. You got to learn a lot of different facets there. So it's pretty overwhelming at first, because not only are you learning how to start up the jet, try to keep your head inside of what's going on, but you're also trying to now fly formation off another guy, and now that formation's got to be a tactical formation, and now that formation leads to an attack, or maybe a simultaneous fight with opposing forces, where now you got to work as a team. So it's not just fighting your jet, but having the awareness of the other guys. Those are the building blocks that the flight school is trying to build upon, so that when you show up to the F-18 in the RAG, you have those fundamentals. So it is fire hose all the way.
Yeah.
But the culmination of getting your wings is going through all that stuff in a quick amount of time. But also every flight that we do, unlike I have a lot of civilian buddies and flying. I did some civilian flying as well. But every hour that we do, hour per hour, is just you can take about 10 civilian flights. What they would do in 10 hours of flying, we do in 1 hour, because it's just go, go, go. And that's why you have to be really on top of it. And that's why the night before you're studying a lot. So that's what flight school is. And then when you go to the F-18 and you're going on the boat for the first time, you're just building upon those same experiences, but now really focused on the task at hand. And because you'd never know. The one thing that's really strange when you go to the boat is they try to plan for good weather, but you never know what the sea state's going to be. So you have a lot of different variables in there that you haven't even planned for. And so building on that experience and getting to that point at the end is kind of where the Navy has really, really fine-tuned their training program, and they've got it down to a T. And so it doesn't seem like you would be, but even your first time at the boat behind the ship, that training just takes over, because you're definitely thinking about it. You're definitely nervous, but as soon as you roll in behind the boat, I don't even remember thinking about anything else except for landing on the ship. And I didn't think that training was going to come into play. I thought I was going to be all over the place thinking about different things and, whatever. But they have it figured out. The Navy has got it figured out after 100 years of doing this.
So it is about the training, that building block approach. It's recognizing that potential early and getting those reps and doing that training that gets you, it kind of delivers you to that point where you can do that next phase of it. No matter how complex it is, that's the ramp up that you have to get to.
Yeah, they definitely, use I know other people use it as well, but that crawl, walk, run philosophy. I mean, that's really what it is. But I feel like a lot of times people probably think that the crawl is more like a jog already starting off, and the running is a sprint. So I mean, it ramps up pretty quickly. But like I said, they perfected this process over hundreds of years with lots of instructors and lots of experience. And so when you see a guy that has wings on his chest, whether it be from any military service, but specifically I think naval aviation as well, especially because we go to the boat in the way that we've been doing things, and because we have one jet doing multiple disciplines, and this goes for the helo community too, and every other aircraft. I mean, just naval aviation, those wings of gold. I mean, when you get those wings of gold, you are standing on the shoulders of other guys that have come before you. A lot of the procedures we have were written in red, in blood, especially carrier ops specifically. So
yeah,
it's not just the accomplishment that you have getting the wings, even though you did a lot of the work, but it's all the people that got you there. It's all your instructors. It's all the people that came before you. It's your fathers, grandfathers that were serving, off the decks during Vietnam. That's the weight that I felt when I got my wings, was all of that and what it represented, and the legacy that I was now charged with keeping and bringing into the future, and hopefully passing on to somebody else.
Yeah. You touched on it briefly. Could you just tell me a little bit about, the first time you went to the carrier, presumably that was in a T-45, and then how that then steps up to doing it in the Super Hornet? Is that, that feel? I mean, that must be a huge weight of responsibility right there.
So first time going on the boat, you really don't know exactly when it's going to happen. I mean, the time frame, what you're out there for, but the specific hour, day, maybe even. You don't know because there's other guys going using the same jets that you're going to be using. So it's one of those things where it's just when it happens, and you just got to be ready to go. And I remember walking, feeling pretty nervous. But once you're in the jet, you know, kind of all that stuff goes away, and you're there. The nice thing is, the first time you ever do it in the T-45, you're off of an instructor's wing, and he brings you out there. You don't really have to worry about the getting out to the carrier so much. They really want you to just focus on the landings. And the first couple, you know, approaches you have to the ship are with the hookup.
Yeah.
And that's just ease the nerves a little bit about, hey, you don't need to worry about actually catching a wire. Don't think about that. Just watch the ball, fly that, listen to the LSO, and just fly a good, safe approach. Be predictable to the extent that you can be as a brand new guy. And then once you've got that, again, out of your way, you've seen it now twice, okay, now put the hook down. Don't even think about that. Just do exactly what you just did before. And if everything goes all right, you should be on deck. And, you know, just a quick funny story about this. You know, every time guys fly jets or airplanes, maybe if they're prone to getting sick, they'll, you know, sometimes in those first couple of flights you'll get sick, right? Well, by this time in the T-45s, you're not, if that was your tendency, you're probably not getting sick anymore, especially if you're flying the plane. It doesn't really happen. So something happened that I did not expect at all. I've been circling around the ship for a little while with my instructor, and that's my time to come in and land. You know, certain fuel states kind of start dictating, hey, this guy needs to be a priority to get on the boat. So, you know, my first time trapping, I catch the one wire, which is the first wire right at the back of the ship, you know, so maybe got a little low there, but I was just happy to be aboard, right?
Yeah.
As they taxi you off, the first thing I needed to do is get fuel because I've been airborne for almost an hour at this point. So I'm sitting there getting fuel. I'm looking around. I'm like seeing this ship. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I did this. I landed on the ship. I'm here. I can, if nothing else happens after this, I can at least say I did it once, which is good enough. You know, like that's a lot. You know, some people wish they could say that, and I've now done it once, and I've always been thinking about this moment for a long time. And as I'm sitting there getting fueled up, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I am, as cool as this is, I'm not feeling so good. I don't know why. And
Wow.
the ship is so big that all you see is the deck around you, the other airplanes, stuff like that. And it finally dawned on me when I started looking out a little bit more that the horizon is just doing this. So I'm sitting in the jet. I've just landed, and about 10 minutes later, I'm like, man, I don't feel so good. I don't know what's going on here. I'm like, I'm not airsick. I'm not even flying right now.
Yeah.
And I was getting seasick sitting in the plane as they're fueling me up to go again. I'm like, oh man, get me off this deck right now. But that's how much movement was on the boat that day. And that was one of the things that, like, you just don't anticipate that stuff until you actually do it. And that caught me by surprise. And I think it's a funny story now that I actually got seasick on my first carrier qualification, you know, started feeling a little woozy. But once I got back in the air, it was fine. It was just funny.
And that was T-45 coming off a land base. You land on, and then you catapult shot off.
That's right. Yeah. And you know, that first cast shot catches you by surprise too. I mean, there's no amount of preparation you can have to really grasp like what is about to happen and the force that's going to put on your body. But man, what a good ride. I really don't have anything to compare that to. However, when you're landing on the carrier, you know, guys ask me all the time, like, what's that like? Well, the best analogy I've come up with is when you're on a roller coaster, like say a modern roller coaster, that whole thing goes around, right? But at the very end, before you actually get out, it comes to a stop, and then it kind of just trucks in a little bit, right? That stop, I'm sure if there was some engineer that was able to, you know, actually measure the G-forces and the acceleration or the deceleration there, it wouldn't even be close. But the human body really can't tell, right? So that initial stop on a roller coaster actually is pretty close, I think, to what it feels like on a carrier landing. So.
And you did a trap, then you did a shot. Did you then go back to the land base? You just did one trap, or did you do something else?
So in the T-45, we're required to get 10 traps, and that was over the course of 2 days.
Wow.
Just because of gas limitations, everybody else, and then of course the sun setting. So we're not doing any night stuff in the T-45. So mine was split between 4. You know, I think I did like 4 one day and then 6 the next day. And it's just go. It's just like launch, back in. You know, taxi, launch, back in. And that's kind of the way it worked for the F-18 too. So the F-18, you've got now more hours. You've been flying the F-18 for a while. The only difference with the F-18 in this case is like it's a little bit bigger aircraft, right? but everything fundamentally is the same getting on the boat. So the one difference is, though, you're going to do it at night. So I took a Wizzo to the boat. He had never in T-45s, the Wizzos never go to the boat, but they do in the RAG for the first time. So the nice thing for them is that they already have a pilot who's at least been to the boat once and seen it, because it's their first time in the back seat there. So that's that's comfort.
It's a trainee Wizzo as well.
It's a training Wizzo, yeah. It's a student Wizzo in the back. You know, I think back in the F-14s, they actually used to bring instructors in the back of the F-14s, but in the F-18 specifically, I had another student Wizzo in the back who had never been to the boat before. So my second time to the boat was his first time. But when we got to the night stuff, that was the first time for both of us. And man, I just remember guys getting screaming power calls at night behind the boat, and I'm like, that's not going to be us. Like, we're not going to get low like that. And so it's weird because you're trying to fly the ball as best you can, but in the back of your mind, you know about those screaming power calls. And so I did what everybody's supposed to not do, and that's just arbitrarily start adding power in close. So you start to tend to get high, and it's not really where you want to be as a student. You just want to be predictable, not trying to game it, you know. And so that was a little bit of a challenge I had to overcome at night in the F-18 for the first time, because again, you just remember all those guys getting screaming power calls, getting low, and that's just not where you want to be. Better to be high than low, obviously, but you know, where you really want to be is just flying the ball, be predictable, and respond to LSO calls. So that's really where that training comes in. And if you prove yourself there, then you know they're going to let you go on to the fleet.
Yeah. Are there any particular skills in terms of flying? Let's take the Super Hornet, you know, around the boat, you know, flying the ball, doing those approaches. Is there anything particular? Is it muscle memory? I mean, what is it?
You know, I think a little bit of it is muscle memory. The more reps you see, the more you can start really focusing in on the really, you know, nitty gritty of it, you know, and really refining your skills. You know, the first time you just want to be safe, right? You want to be predictable at the boat with the LSOs, otherwise they're going to send you back to the beach. Once you've seen it, once you've kind of dealt with it a couple times, now you really just want to start making every approach just a little bit better. And the way you can do that is maybe a little bit of muscle memory, but you're now recognizing how the ball responds to your power correction. You realize that maybe you don't need as big of ones here, but you know, maybe you do here now. You know, your line, but again, everything's going to change, because the one thing that you have to deal with the carrier is there natural wind coming over the deck, or is there is the ship creating its own wind by, you know, going 25, 30 knots in the ocean, you know, to get that wind over the deck. Yeah. And that creates different wind effects on the back of the ship. And every landing signal officer, every guy, you know, that's keeping us safe on the back of the ship will say, hey, don't worry about all that stuff, just fly the ball. And that's absolutely true. But you have to realize as well, though, that if that's happening, the ball is going to respond just a little bit differently. So having that in the back of your mind and being prepared for those things is kind of where that experience starts taking over. So maybe a little bit of muscle memory, but every situation, every day is going to be a little bit different on the boat. You know, maybe the sun's in your way this time. Maybe the visibility is lower. Maybe it's raining. Maybe the sea state's a little bit crazy. Maybe you're, maybe you're not feeling good. Maybe there's something different about you. Maybe you just came up with a 7-hour mission rather than just doing CQ where you just were sitting in the ready room an hour ago. You know, all these different things really play into it, and I think that's where the training comes into play and all the reps and stuff like that. That's why we practice before we go to the ship out the field, you know, quite a bit actually. But even since I left the F-18, they've made significant improvements to the software, the program in the F-18. And so I can't even talk to that stuff, but, you know, I was just manual ball flyer the whole time. And I think guys, you know, they've made it safer, I think, for guys. And that's actually a good thing.
And can you tell us a little bit about your transition from that then into the adversary community? Because obviously now you're flying F-5s with VFC-13. How did you make that jump?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty well known that, you know, in naval aviation, anybody that follows it, that, you know, how you do in your fleet squadron, you know, and the needs in the Navy kind of go hand in hand sometimes, right? The list that came out for me was, you know, a lot of instructor positions, a lot of adversary positions. You know, there were some billets to go be a tactics instructor at one of the weapons schools, things like that. So you kind of like just list your things out there. And primarily I was just thinking about being an instructor, maybe in the F-18, something like that. Really hadn't given adversary a whole lot of thought. And we did have guys that were in our squadron that were prior adversary, and they kind of talked to that a little bit. But I never ever thought that the F-5 was something I'd ever go fly. I mean, I actually remember flying in the RAG against those guys and thinking to myself, like, man, that's some older guy who's been in the Navy a lot longer who just wanted not to, didn't want to do anything else except fly simple airplanes and beat up on RAG students and
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And then when you come to it and you get selected for this job, when I got selected, we knew we were coming to Fallon. At first we were a little apprehensive. We didn't really know what to expect. But when you get here, you realize that whether you're in Key West or Fallon, that yes, these guys are flying F-5s, and yes, the F-5 is a very simple airplane, but the guys who are flying them are well experienced guys, and their job and their mission set, where their heart is to really make the fleet the best that it can be, to present the best opposition and red air that there is. And so I was floored when I came here to see the amount of professionalism and the execution of these guys and how they do it every single day. And some of it becomes routine because, you show the same presentation over and over, maybe with slight modifications. But the level of detail they've really put into it and to make it a full-on picture, because, what everybody understands here is that this is our job, first of all, but it's the taxpayers' money that are putting these jets up in the air, and all the maintenance guys that have been working on these jets to get these up in the air. We don't want to waste their time or money, hour per hour. So we want to put up the best presentation that we can day in, day out, no matter what the weather, no matter what the scenario is, no matter what, if it's 2 students in the RAG that are coming out to see us, or if it's a full-on air wing out here for Fallon, before they go on a cruise and ship off. Every time we go up there, we're trying to give them the best presentation. We have a couple cheats that we do with that, but I was really floored with what they could do with the F-5 for one. The F-5 has its own specific strengths and weaknesses, but just like every aircraft. But out here flying in Fallon is very, very unique because we have the high desert, we have an open airspace, we have these mountains that we can hide behind. And, with what guys are dealing with, over in the Middle East in some areas, like the training that they're getting, especially in the close air support scenarios, are fairly realistic, I would say. It's great training. So I was floored when I got here. And after I got here, I was very happy that I was actually selected to be here because it has been pretty eye-opening, compared to what I thought it was.
Can you just tell me a couple of things about the core roles of VFC 13, the day-to-day stuff that you guys do, typically on the squadron?
Sure. So, our primary mission at VFC 13 is really to provide any kind of air support that is required for the fleet. And that'd be Navy, Marine Corps. And the guys, and really to get a good idea of what that means is we are dealing with everything from growlers coming down from Whidbey, whether they be boat squadrons or expeditionary. We deal with every single flavor of F-18 there is basically between and their mission in the specific mission sets inside of the F-18, as opposing forces. And then what I think is really neat too is we actually provide close air support for visiting SEAL teams and special warfare teams that come out to Fallon. Now, a lot of people don't know that. We don't touch on that a lot because we don't do it a ton, but it's one of the missions that we do. So really, when you combine all those together, we are just a customer service agency, really, opposing force, if you will, and then even support for our guys on the ground. Just in any role that we can come up with that is capable. And the nice thing about the F-5 is it's relatively cheaper to fly than an F-18 or some other platform. So the capabilities maybe aren't there just yet, but it serves its purpose still because we still can, do some things in the air that, make it kind of, a good platform to train guys with. So for the guys on the, for the SEALs specifically, I'll talk to that for a second. There's ranges out here that have simulated towns. There's different, mountains that they're going across. This is very similar to what our guys, our forces over in Afghanistan and other places are dealing with. The high terrain. It's almost like Sierra Nevadas are very similar to what you might see in Afghanistan or something, right? So this terrain, this area, and this environment is very conducive to their training. But while they would like to have maybe an F-16 or an F-18 come in, or an A-10 come in with some really Gucci, hardware on it, some bombs or some laser guide bombs, GPS bombs or something like that, right? in the training that they're doing, sometimes they're doing that crawl, walk, run as well. So in that kind of scenario where they're doing that stuff, they don't necessarily need bombs come off the jet. They're just trying to work on procedural stuff. And procedurally, when they're calling in airstrikes, all they need is an aircraft with a pilot in it that can, put the aircraft in the right position so they can call, give them the authority to drop or not. And that's where we come in, because now we're a cheap aircraft to fly that, but we don't have all the cool systems on our aircraft to maybe, cheat a little bit. And if this guy's giving us a bad talk on, we still know where it's at, right? Like, no, this is more like Vietnam style CAS, like where you have to give me a good talk on. So it really reinforces their procedures just from hey, I'm talking to a guy in a plane, trying to talk him onto this point. So for a CAS scenario, the F-5 is actually pretty good from the basics and the fundamentals building block approach. And where we really shine in the adversary role, which is where our bread and butter is simulating those threats that you may not think about, because you're thinking about like the big guys with all the capabilities and stuff like that, the airborne stuff that's going to get you. But if you're so focused on those guys, you might forget about the F-5 who's hanging down at 500 feet behind this mountain, who's just as capable as long as he sees you and can get and they can merge. If you don't see it, then that's going to be a problem for you. So one of the things that's really cool about the F-5 and being an adversary specifically in large, whether you're flying F-18s, F-16s, F-15s, whatever, is it's a win-win scenario every single time we go out to fight. If we're out there putting together a presentation and the Blue Forces, the guys, our brothers that are in the fleet that are going to go deploy, if they just completely do their job and wipe us out, even as hard as we make it, if they just completely do a great job, then we're happy about that. That's awesome, because that makes us feel good. Those are our brothers. We want to see them win. We want to see them do stuff. However, and this is usually what happens sometimes, is there's always going to be something that they learn. There's always going to be a takeaway. There's always going to be training to be had. That's the whole point, right? So when things don't go very well, when we do end up getting, maybe the best of them or something like that, or they didn't see something, again, we love that, because now we've just made our guys that much better. We gave them something they weren't expecting, or they couldn't handle. They're going to take that back to the debrief, which is the most important part of any flight, right? It's just what happened, what went right, what went wrong, mostly what went wrong, so we can improve upon that and do better tomorrow. And that's where the training comes in. So it's a win-win for us. We love seeing them do well, but it's also a good thing when we see them not do so well, because we know they're going to go back, and the instructors specifically, the guys that went through the weapon schools, are going to come back and say, hey, here's what we need to improve upon. And I think you see that ramp up for the next day, those guys getting better. And it makes me feel good that those are our guys going across the pond to go take care of work, because we know that we played a small part in that, but it's really the work that they put in when they come out to Fallon against us that makes their days, makes this country. You should make this country proud.
No, absolutely. I've seen it when I've come and visited Fallon before, and it's amazing. And and it's also amazing, I think, that you do so much with that jet, because it is a fairly basic jet, and
it is.
You get a lot from it, and you're going to be getting more from it. Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the improvements that are coming along, which are going to really change things for you?
There are other air services that are looking at getting other airplanes and flying other airplanes. Specifically, there's a company out here that just got a bunch of F-5s, and based on their experimental status and like just how they are as a civilian contractor, they are able to kind of get to the point where they can put a lot of these different, they can really experiment, but design a panel or a system or an avionics system or something that's going to give them a little bit of a lead or an advantage in the air arena. And really what it's doing is it's not even giving them an advantage. It's really plussing up the profile and what this platform can do, even though it's on an F-5 airframe.
Yeah.
So you're still getting the cheap cost of the F-5. It's a very simple airplane that's in that sense, even though they're throwing some avionics that just require a little bit more attention, but it's really more of a capability that they're putting on. And, we're still waiting to get that stuff in the Navy. We're kind of seeing it play out a little bit with this company that's, providing a supplemental red air for us. And so I think the Navy and them are working hand in hand to get that stuff. And I think that, when the Navy thinks about going to another adversary platform, maybe plussing it up, getting, Super Hornets now, or, F-16s or something like that, which, Top Gun operates already.
Yeah.
You could put that same capability on an F-5. I think it makes it, it definitely makes it a little bit more capable, and it justifies its existence, especially when you could do those kind of things. And again, the guys that are designing that stuff, the guys that are implementing those policies and those capabilities into the airframe are experienced guys that know what they're doing, and it's really, really cool to see what their thought process and what they can do, come up with, and then go out to the range and execute it. And really, I think we're in the first stages of seeing what those capabilities are and how they interact with the fleet forces. And hey, did we provide you something that's actually valuable? While still maintaining cost in the F-5, still making it easy for our maintainers to, work on these jets and our pods to fly them, by having the capabilities there. And I think that's what we should be doing. As things evolve, that's what we should be doing.
Yeah.
And I think that these people, the Navy in general, are taking the necessary steps to make, tomorrow's fighters and tomorrow's adversaries that much more capable, that much better. Because if we stay where we're at, it's not going to be representative of what we could actually face out there. And then we detract from our actual job, which is preparing those fleet forces, right? So we do the same thing all the time, but every day. The F-5 mission is really specific to what it's supposed to do. We're not really out there just doing fun flights or just, messing around. Every day is either we're BFMing or doing a low level, which is, the more time and exposure we have to that is just going to make us that much better for when we actually, are doing it in an exercise for real, because we're now comfortable down low, or, hey, BFM is one of those things that if you don't do it a lot, you kind of become not very proficient. But we do it all the time. So when guys come out here, that's what it is. So any day that we get to do BFM or low level is an awesome day. And some days, very, very few times, you get to do both. And that's just a great day, because you take off, and we don't have a lot of gas in the F-5, obviously. So we take off. And if you're BFMing, you're usually max performing. So you're in afterburn, which means you're using a lot of gas. And then down on the deck, low level, you're using a lot of gas down because of lower altitudes. Just burns a little more. So you could be done with a full flight in 20 minutes, no kidding, be out of gas, and you just had a 20-minute workout because you're BFMing and low leveling and through these mountains and stuff like that. I mean, there are times where I come back and I'm like, man, that was a workout. And I'm glad it was only 20 minutes because I'm out of gas, because any longer it would have been pretty exhausting. But every time you get to jump at a jet and go do that, that's your mission. Like, that's what you're getting paid to do. I mean, how can you top that? And especially the weather out here and the scenery out here, and the actual mission set is pretty awesome. I've had some memorable missions over the last 12 years. And like I said, I kind of prioritize them because people ask me this all the time. Like, hey, what has been some of your best missions? Of what are your flights that you remember specifically, and maybe all your career, or whatever. And obviously, we talked about going to the boat for the first time. That was obviously awesome, And then the first time you fly an F-18, but you think about your first combat mission, and like, wow, all that training in flight school is finally what we're able to do. And I would say, first and foremost, my primary mission as being a naval aviator was to serve this country, and the capacity that the Navy allowed me to do that was as a tactical jet fighter, which I was very humbled and blessed that I had that opportunity. And try not to take it for granted, because I knew that it was just something that was only going to last, for a little bit of time. For the 26 missions I did, I mean, that's not a lot of missions when you compare it to like guys that they were flying in World War II, even Vietnam. I mean, guys would do 26 missions in a week, right? But, that's just not what we did. We were doing 7-hour missions. We had a lot of guys in our squadron. Not everybody could go do stuff.
In Afghanistan.
Yeah, in Afghanistan. And, not everybody can fly every single day, and those missions got to spread it out a little bit, right? So, over 6 months that we were over there, 26 missions is what I came out to be. And I loved and remember every single one of them, because every single time, even though it was a little slower when we were there, I mean, guys that came before us and after us did, a little bit more. But I tell you what, I was actually kind of happy that there wasn't a whole lot going on, because that just meant that our guys on the ground weren't getting into the same things that they required my assistance in, Yeah. Occasionally that happened. And we were there, that's what we were trained for. We were there to take care of whatever the mission at hand was. And those were very memorable things. And that was my priority. That was, when I look back on my whole naval aviation career, that's the proudest moments I had, is like being on time, in position to assist the guy on the ground so that he could go home to his wife, mom, kids, whatever. I mean, that was primarily what I wanted to do. And that's all I could do, right? Is just make sure that I was where I was supposed to be, and provide whatever was necessary at the time that I needed to be necessary, right? So then take a step down from that. Obviously, training the fleet and being an adversary and doing a professional job here, and really, in these dynamic situations, being a good enough pilot that where you have the situational awareness to keep guys safe. Because remember that we're in training, so keeping guys safe is primary, is the next thing. So anytime that we come back from a flight where they got training done, whether it was good training or bad training, but the fact that everybody lands is probably, those are important facets here, because it's hard. We've lost guys in training. We don't, that's just part of the business sometimes, but it's our job as adversaries to make sure that you're on our home turf and we're going to give you a safe presentation. So, I mean, that's as equally important, because it still brings home that mindset of guys going home safely to their whatever. Because we're not really in combat here, but we're training for it. So we do kind of go out there with our, our teeth out and, just ready to go, but it needs to be safe. So, I feel like that's a mission I have, is to make sure I go out there and give safe execution. But the most memorable flights that I had, I think recently, especially like when I was in the fleet too, is with my sailors. Because every time one of them was Sailor of the Year, or maybe I had a guy retiring, or maybe it was a flight surgeon that, doesn't get to fly a whole lot. Anytime that I was asked to put one of those guys in my back seat, I loved it. I jumped on it, because I was able to take someone who doesn't get experience and stuff. Maybe it's just one flight they're ever going to get, put them in the back seat, and then show them exactly what their hard work has contributed to. Flying in combat, taking my sailors up in the jet, inspiring the next generation through the air shows, and then also just making sure that we give safe presentations out here in Fallon, Nevada, so that guys can go out and do all those things I just talked about. Every time I get to do that is probably one of the best days I've had, in naval aviation. That's what it's all about for me.
What an amazing insight. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, as it is always. I know you've got to go flying now.
We'll go flying.
Let you go to work. Have a great day, and thank you so much. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, Jamie. Hey, listen, I just tell you, I appreciate all the work you've done. I appreciate everything that you do. I love this little set that you have. I think barbecue and aviation is like the perfect mix of everything. I mean, genius, right?
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a lot of naval aviators out there that come home and they're smoking something. They got their barbecue grill out there. I mean, me included. I've got one in the backyard as well. So not the setup that you have, but very, very, we all aspire to have that kind of setup. But yeah, that's what a great mix. And thank you for your time and all the stuff that you've done for aviation at large. I mean, we appreciate that.
Thanks, Abe. It's great talking to you. Thank you very much indeed.